Yay. All right, beautiful. Okay, so thank you all so much for being here today. It is an ultimate pleasure to be here, along some really cool people. Okay, so this series name is going to be called Mindset Before Infrastructure. And this is going to be a series where I, meet cool people that I really, let's say, respect and appreciate in their line of work. And I'm super happy to be accompanied by one of the really awesome people that I found out online, Louay Shaat, who is a fantastic guy. You can check out his work online, and you can probably check out his work on LinkedIn. He's got a website where he has labs as well. So a bit about Louay. So Louay is currently a specialist solution architect, security in EMEA, basically in AWS, Amazon Web Services. And he had past experience working for really big enterprises such as Red Hat and for IBM, if I'm not mistaken. Correct, Louay?
That's correct, awesome. Yes.
This is really, really cool. Good to have somebody with that caliber in here. And yeah, so today's topic is going to be talking about how the cloud can really integrate with the workloads coming in from banks. And I really figured out that Louay is the best person to talk about this subject and share the stage with us today. Somebody with that caliber and a lot of experience. You're currently based in Dubai, correct?
That's correct. I moved to Dubai about 9 months ago now. So yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, so this is a bit of background. Thank you so much, Louay, for doing this. The floor is yours. If you want to introduce yourself, have any opening remarks before we go ahead. We have a lot of ground to cover today.
I'm sure. Well, just quickly, hi everyone. Ameen, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here and thanks for having me. So as Ameen mentioned, I'm a specialist solutions architect here around security. So I spend my days talking to customers from large enterprise to small startups in terms of how they can improve their security posture in the cloud. And that's something that I'm very passionate about. I try to do a lot of public content to enable people that are interested in AWS understand security and build security services on top of AWS. So it's good to be here and discuss some interesting topics.
So awesome to have you, Louay. We're really privileged today. Okay, cool. So we want to start first, Louay, because you probably know that we've already established that this is going to be a very casual talk where we cover everything that we find interesting within the bank, like landscape and cloud. So I want to start first by asking, giving a bit of context here. I want to get your opinion on that. Okay, can you give us a bit of context about the special needs that banks do have? So what is so special about banks' needs that it needs to be catered with, with the utmost level of, let's say, confidentiality, really utter amount of care when we're talking about banks, like when you really compare them, against other lines of work, basically.
Banks are quite complex organizations, right? They deal with very, very sensitive data, right? You can imagine your banking infrastructure where you're doing your credit card transactions, your loans, essentially a lot of really information, a lot of important information that's relevant for people that are using banks. So there's a lot of compliance and regulations that they have to abide by. So if we take something simple like credit card transactions, you need to be PCI DSS compliant, which is essentially a framework and a compliance that helps organizations build secure infrastructure to be able to process credit card payments. So that's a very, very small example in terms of what the banks have to go through to be able to build services. The plethora of compliance and regulations that they have to go through is quite a lot, which essentially makes it a complex business by default, but also really an interesting business to also modernize and improve on. I'm lucky that I've been working, I moved from Australia over the last 2 years where I've been working with the top 4 banks in Australia that have gone through massive transformations in terms of moving to the cloud. So at AWS, we try to make it easier for customers, right? We try to make security and compliance in the cloud second nature to businesses, regardless of whether you're banking or not, and improve and simplify the process of migrating workloads to the cloud.
Awesome, awesome. I can really second you on that, because from my past experience working for global banks such as BNP Paribas, it was always apparent for me that people who work in banking have a different mindset when it comes to thinking about the way they integrate infrastructure and talk about security. It looks like they have a different world out there when you're working with banks. And sometimes I don't really blame them for that, because with the level of security and compliance that they have to meet, sometimes you have to go to that extra mile, of doing so much work on your behalf just to be there, at that picture. So this is really cool. And I think one of the issues that I found out also is that a lot of banks tend to think that they can do a better job compared to big providers such as, cloud services. So what's your take on that? Are you fully on board, or you beg to disagree? What's your take? This is a tricky one.
It's not to disagree. I mean, I like to talk about facts and figures rather than just anecdotes. So I think in AWS, we believe that customer expectations have changed. And banks have to adopt to meet that customer demand, right? So customers are expecting banks to be able to answer questions like, what's the best way for me to communicate with my bank when I need help? Will my bank be able to meet my urgent needs in an immediate and long term? How can you help me manage my debt, adjust my budget, and take advantage of some of the programs that are available for me locally and globally? So that means that customers are expecting a personalized service, especially in the digital climate that we live in today, right? It's no longer brick and mortar where I have to go to the bank to deal with you, right? You need to be able to reach me at the right time. So I have some statistics. I'm just going to pull it up. Just give me a second. So 70% of banking institutions say customer centricity is a priority, but only 13% of customers are satisfied with the amount of personalization that's available.
Wow.
50% of customers would buy a product from their primary bank if they made a personalized offer. Wow. $300 million is estimated revenue growth can be achieved by financial institutions for every 100 billion in assets by personalized experiences. So that means that we need to not just concentrate on the core business, but we need to improve the experience for our customers. And that's just no longer me being able to have a mobile app. It's having a mobile app that's intuitive enough that understands my budget, understands what my payments are coming up, gives me notifications when I need to. So there's a lot more experience that's expected from banks today that balances that thing where I can build it within my own data center. In AWS, and I'm going to give you a couple of really, really small examples, right? We have a service called Amazon Connect, which is essentially our contact center in the cloud. It gives the ability for you as a customer to unify all your omni-channel experiences, whether you're talking about chats, you're talking about web type traffic or calls, to give you that integrated experience. And you can integrate it with machine learning services, getting sentiment analysis, translation live, chatbots, real-time, historical kind of data analytics. Customers are expecting that from the bank today. If you want to build it in your data center, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's hard work. Hard work. Our job at AWS is to make it easier for you. We have these services available for you on an API level where you can integrate your core banking system with AWS to be able to get that richness from your data and provide that personalized experience.
Exactly. So this is exactly one of the topics that I wanted to talk about, which is the subject of Amazon Connect. But you already, brought it forward. So this is really awesome. But we have a lot of content, I promise. So yeah, I do agree, and I think, as you said, like now with the advent of machine learning, a lot of customers are expecting that you're going to bring, machine learning to add value to them and their services that they're using. So something like Amazon Connect. And speaking about machine learning, there's one really cool service that I really dig with you guys, which is Macy. I believe Macy. I mean, Macy is a great deal. It's so cool. Macy. Yeah. So one of the things that banks normally have to handle is the idea of personal data, especially that we have now this sort of I wouldn't say hype, but I would say there's this demand coming in from most regulators today, to really focus on personal data and give it the respect that it needs, the regard that it needs. And something like Macy, you know what? How about you give us a background on Macy so people can get acquainted with the subject here first?
Sure thing. So if you have a look at AWS, there are some core services that the majority of our customers use. If you want to be able to store data in AWS, most likely you're going to be storing it into S3. And S3 is our object storage service that gives you the ability to expand exponentially in terms of the data that you're kind of collecting from customers or data that you're building internally. One of the biggest things that we've seen talking to customers is, how do I identify that data that's in my S3 bucket? In some cases, the S3 bucket is interacting with third parties outside of AWS and is also providing some internal services. I want to be able to identify something that shouldn't be there and take some action on it. And that's where Macy really comes in. Macy gives you the ability to continuously scan your S3 buckets to identify a lot of different personally identifiable data objects like names, addresses, credit card numbers. We have the ability to also surface what type of credit card number is. Is it an Amex? Is it a Visa? Is it whatever it is that you're using? We can also surface health data. your kind of medical records from a US perspective, from a UK perspective. We can identify types of bank accounts like European banks account versus American bank accounts. Really, really valuable data for organizations to say, if you see these types of metrics within my S3 bucket, take immediate action. If it is meant to be there, then fantastic. If it's not meant to be there, Macy gives you the ability to remediate that as well. Blocking access to the S3 bucket, for example, redacting data, and there's multiple things that you can do to kind of manage that life cycle of the data. And it's a great service that basically is built on machine learning models that we have implemented over 20 years in Amazon that we've adopted into AWS, which is a great way to see that collaboration as well.
This is wonderful, Larry, because in my past experience, I remember it used to be a very, we used to have these thorough exercises where we go over the data and try to classify them, which is, it's not an easy task by definitely like so
any stretch of the imagination. Absolutely.
Oh my God, yeah, don't get me started on that. And I think with something like Macy, where you have this sort of automated means, to go ahead and try to dig deep within your, as you said, buckets, it really eases the job for everybody like within the environment to understand what's going on. So yeah, among the other stuff that you guys have, what I want to just shed light on, okay, so I want you to take me exactly about through what really happened across the years now. What recent changes, that have happened, across the years that really changed the mindset for people and in terms of their adoption for the cloud. So what happened in the cloud that is now, making it as a feasible option for people, to really use it, especially banks and financial institutions that have historically have not been, let's say on the bandwagon when it comes to adopting the cloud for numerous reasons, but maybe you want to shed some light about that subject.
I think it's first important to understand that cloud has been around for a while now. So AWS has been around for a long time. We're talking about over 15 years in terms of as an enterprise organization operating the cloud model. So it's not an immature idea. We have a lot of large enterprises, whether we're talking about banking, health, insurance, startups. The majority of the services that you're using online today are probably running on AWS. So what has happened over the last 15 years is cloud providers like AWS have matured enough to understand the complexity that organizations have to go through to be able to build services. And I think that's probably one of the biggest values of cloud services is the ability to get started quickly, right? You don't want to have this massive investment to be able to start up building something in the cloud. It's a pay-per-use model. So essentially you pay for what you use. If you use it today and it's successful, fantastic, keep it running. If it's not successful and the venture doesn't actually pan out, shutting down your resources essentially means that you don't pay, which is a model that's extremely liberating for customers that are trying to expand their footprint and innovate. So over the last 15 years, what we've done as AWS is not just focus on the core services that we're expecting to be able to run workloads, but offering those high level services. Like you touched on Macy, for example, that's a service to implement that would take months and in some cases years to be able to perfect that within a customer's environment. Our hyperscale enables us to be able to provide you an API-based service that you can easily adopt to be able to do that. So what we've seen over the last 15 years is customers essentially move to the cloud, seeing the value of the cloud, and they asked us a lot of questions, right? So that's fantastic. Now you've given me this per-use model. Awesome, great, we love it. But that's the history now. What's next? And next came a lot of different shifts in terms of how we build services as well. So the concept of DevOps and agility in terms of how you build things, microservices, moving away from this big monolith type workload that we used to run in our data centers, that big Oracle workload or the big SAP workload that used to house every intelligent thing that I have. It's now become microservices, right? Let's build small components that have rich feature set for our customers, and we can keep on expanding on that. And the scale of AWS enables you to do this globally, right? And just, sorry, the other aspect that I want to touch on is the global nature of AWS. If you want to expand and you want to be able to reach customers worldwide, it's so easy in AWS. It's something that we used to think about. I remember working for a telco in New Zealand about 12 years ago, and we were thinking about how we're going to expand into Australia. Like, we're not talking about the other side of the world. We're talking about the country next door. And that's a challenge. That's a big challenge. Today, it's just like, oh, what region do I want to deploy this in? I want to deploy it in Sydney. I want to deploy in Bahrain. Awesome, let's go and do it. So that's one aspect. Specifically when it comes to the banking industry, what we've done from security perspective is make it second nature for them that their expectation of an enterprise organization that has really strict compliance requirements can operate on the same level from a security perspective and even better in the cloud. And I think that's what we've been trying to do for our banking customers in general.
Now, this is really interesting that you brought this subject about compliance, because for the people around here that are with us today, can you just shed some light on the really, let's say, the priorities that regulators today have? What are the compliance difficulties that banks have to go through in order to have that sort of landscape infrastructure in order to meet that regulators' expectations?
Right. So let's take something that we discussed previously, like PCI DSS, or let's take SOC 1, 2, and 3, right, which are frameworks that banks need to abide by. Mm-hmm. If you start looking about how do I actually certify my workloads to become PCI DSS compliant or SOC compliant, you have to look at the network, you have to look at the data center, physical access control, your hypervisor layer, your security on all these levels. That's just the base for you to be able to start looking at your compliance framework. On top of that, you have a look at your workload itself. How do I evaluate my workload? How do I assess that? And it's a long-winded process that banks have to go through to be able to build all that security posture, all the way from a physical layer to a digital layer to an infrastructure layer to an application layer. And on top of that, some of the things they discussed around personally identifiable data and how do you actually manage that and how do you classify that. So what we've done in AWS to kind of ease that is we do have the concept of the shared responsibility model in AWS, where essentially AWS is responsible for protecting the infrastructure that runs all of our services in the cloud. So that means hardware, software, networking, and facilities that run AWS, that's our responsibility. We get the various attestations and compliance framework for across our services. And we do have today over 35 global frameworks that we're compliant and assessed against, and also a lot of different local ones. We're IRA compliant in Australia, we're C+ compliant in Germany, all the different types of compliances that we need to abide by. We take that effort to make sure that our services are compliant. So you as a customer, when you start coming to build on AWS, you just worry about your workload. You want to run your core banking infrastructure on AWS, great. We give you a plethora of documentation in terms of how to secure it, how to make it PCI DSS compliant, how to make it SOC compliant. You run that on top of AWS, and your responsibility becomes a lot smaller from the attestation and the regulation that you have to go through. But we didn't even stop there. We realized that auditors have a hard time getting that data and automating that data. So last year in November, we released a new service called AWS Audit Manager, which essentially helps you continuously audit your AWS usage by collecting metrics from AWS, making it available for you on a dashboard that you can easily present to your auditors. So even when it comes to the hard and difficult topics like compliance, we're trying to make it easier for our customers to be able to adopt our services as well.
Yeah, I don't think people appreciate, when managed services are really done well. I think this is what you get, with somebody who had, as you said, 20 years worth of experience, almost 20 years, being around businesses, understanding what they want, and especially in a difficult and a complicated line of work like banking. Somebody who spent a lot of years there is definitely gonna appreciate what you guys have to offer out of the box. As you said, API level access from the console, you get like a plethora of gateways, to access, those functionalities. Just beautiful for me, honestly. You also, when you talked about the global presence aspect about AWS, now, one of the things that, at least here on Bahrain, from my experience, dealing with a lot of customers in here, the idea of high availability is not really used to the maximum, the way I see it. Yeah. Now, from your own experience, somebody like yourself who worked with AWS for quite some time now, and the inside and the insights and like the details of what banks basically lack, and how can we really let's say realize the potential of what AWS has to offer in terms of their global infrastructure, specifically within high availability for banks, right, to operate?
There's a couple of things that you need to kind of understand about our global presence when it comes to AWS. We have over 25 regions that essentially traverse the globe, all the way from Australia to South America. That covers the majority where we see our customers operating highly. And we're really glad that we do have a region in Bahrain today, which basically helps a lot of our MENA customers to be able to build locally and build all those services on top of that. But it's important to understand the design of a region within AWS. So a region is typically comprised of a minimum of 2 availability zones, and the majority of the cases it's 3. An availability zone is a collection of data centers. So you can imagine every single availability zone that is exposed to you as a customer is not one data center, it's multiple data centers. And you have multiple availability zones within a specific region. So high availability and redundancy is the core of what we do. So essentially, you can imagine I get two VMs, two virtual machines. I'm talking about like the basic things that you can do in AWS, two EC2 instances. I'm going to run in the Bahrain region. I'm going to run it in availability zone A and availability zone B. Essentially, I'm running them in two different data centers, completely separated from networking, from storage, from compute, from everything. Essentially, that gives you that high availability. And then I can take a higher level service from an AWS like a load balancer, and I could put that on top that runs on a regional level, and I've built high availability within my application. It's as simple as that. And I think this is the beauty of it, right? You don't have to think about high availability within AWS. If you architect your application properly, understand how the cloud works in terms of the regional and the zonal type setup that we do have within a region, you can easily build highly available services within AWS. We've made all of our services integrate really, really nicely with each other. So when you build a load balancer, it'll automatically ask you what type of, what am I load balancing? I'm load balancing this machine and this machine. Oh, cool. And they're both in two different availability zones. Excellent. Now I understand the networking stack. Boom, he's a publicly available URL that you can access your EC2 instances behind it, and that's it. You're up and running. So I think that's kind of the value that we do bring in that case, and also the simplicity. You can imagine trying to do this in your data center. It's difficult, right? And it's like, let's take something simple like the network address range, right? How are you gonna extending your network across two different data centers, making failover seamlessly and high availability seamlessly across applications? There's a lot of work. I was there. I was one of the data center technicians in a telco in New Zealand. And I remember that the amount of work and automation that we can even do internally rather than exposing it to our customers is really, really hard. So I think what the cloud has done, or what AWS has done, is that made it so easy for you to have high availability as a second nature. We have customers that are talking about regional failover, right? They're serving customers in the US, in the UK, and in Europe. And they have their workloads running in Bahrain, for example, and tomorrow they want to be able to replicate the whole infrastructure in a region in Frankfurt. It's 5 minutes piece of work. You document as infrastructure as code, cloud formation, and then you just pop that script somewhere and you're done, right? I mean, I gotta tell you, like coming from a strong infrastructure background, when I first moved to AWS, I kind of was depressed a little bit because it made me feel like the last 10 years of my life, I was doing a lot of work that people came and automated in a click of a button, right? Which was a bit of a shock to me.
Exactly. Like when you put your hands on the infrastructure space and system, is this real? Am I living in this real world?
It can't be that simple.
It can't be that simple. Just plug and play. As you said, it's like for me, when I got started with AWS, it was really magical for me. It's just, a matter of clicking buttons to establish everything, as you said. But in the real world, when you have your on-prem setup, there's a lot of shuffling. There's a lot of coordination with, customers that, hey, we're probably going to have, a downtime during that period. You might not be happy, but you're just going to have to manage. And to have something, as you said, you can really build complicated architectures, which is really beautiful. Sure. Like imagine if you want to have, as you said, regional failover, and if you want to have a failover that happens on an AZ level, multi-AZ setup. So these really cool things, this just gets you a lot of potential to explore other choices, to keep your infrastructure resilient, to keep your customers happy when something goes bad. And one of the things that I really admire about Netflix, I know we're diverging somehow away from banking, but
no, it's all good. I love this conversation. That's great.
Exactly. But Netflix has a lot of really cool things that can really benefit the banking sector, especially with their SeamyMonkey setup, with their setup, with their exploring chaos engineering, for example. And, with the couple of scripts, you can just take down a whole AZ, you can take down a whole region, and just you can really test in production. This has never happened across history before, that you know what, we're gonna now experiment in production. Like if you tell that to your CIO, you're gonna get fired.
Oh yeah. I mean, let me expand a little bit on what you said, because that's a really, really good point. So Chaos Monkey was revolutionary when it first came up. So as you probably know, Netflix is 100% on AWS. So every single stream that you watch from Netflix today is running on AWS. So Netflix is probably one of the most innovative customers that we do have on our platform. They've released an insane amount of open source projects that helped our customers worldwide adopt things. And Chaos Monkey was one of those things where it's like, it redefined how people define fault tolerance, right? So they build resilient infrastructure on top of AWS, and they run Chaos Monkey, which essentially starts bringing some of their components down live in production. And they wanted to be able to do that to the certain level of confidence that any component within my infrastructure can go down today without it affecting my customer experience, which is a beautiful thing to be able to build into production. And on that point, also last year, we built a fault injection simulator. which is essentially based on the chaos monkey theory, where now you can automate chaos engineering on top of AWS with pre-canned type scenarios. Like you can say, bring my AZ down. And you can basically simulate having an availability zone down within a specific region, and it tests the tolerance of your application. So, I mean, if you want to go into the level of maturity, we can definitely match your expectations as a customer. And we get customers that do push this a lot. The likes of Uber, the likes of Netflix, really push the boundaries of what we do, which helps us innovate. And the great thing in AWS is that if we make it available for Netflix, it's available for that small startup that has 5 people, it's available for the large enterprise, and it's available for everyone else. So we've helped democratize IT. And I think this is a big thing that I'm really proud to be of an organization that's essentially helping in a lot of different industries bring that experience to anyone that wants to be able to use the services today.
I heard so many stories about how really small businesses can, probably maintain millions of users, which is crazy. Like, back in the day, you had to have, the hands-on with the infrastructure, you had to shuffle things and everything. But now, as you said, when you have the proper tooling, when you have the proper tool chain to manage those things with scripts and everything, you can even go to that level, as you said, take down, and you can practice basically your DR exercises with no headache. Now, this is really an interesting point because, again, coming in from different global banks in the past, the DR aspect of it, for the people here, disaster recovery is really a painful exercise to go through, and sometimes it's really extremely difficult to do that because you might not really try it in production. You might not, you're just waiting, you're just wishing for the best, that when something happens in production, we'll be able to manage it well, just like what we tested it, in the live play. But as you said, when you have those tools, when you have that infrastructure and everything is being managed for yourself. So it's just a matter of plug and play, the right education for the right platform, and then you're probably good to go. Now, we cannot touch, we cannot basically skip this idea, as you probably just talked about resilience and everything about that. I want to talk about monitoring, right? Because I think monitoring is an essential aspect for every organization that needs to be resilient all the time. Now, I know in AWS, you guys have a tremendous amount of offerings from CloudWatch and all of these things. You probably want to shed some light, because I can really tell you firsthand that I had, let's say, close experience with the ELK stack, Elastic Suite, the Elastic Suite, things like Elasticsearch, Kibana, and the other, items that go hand in hand. So to build that infrastructure on your own is not an easy job, just like with any clustered system. So maybe you want to take us through this, conversation. Tell us about your offering in terms of monitoring and how people can really use it.
Absolutely. I think logging and monitoring and understanding your environment is an absolute key for success in the cloud, right? You need to understand what you're running for you to be able to run it properly. I think there's a couple of things that I want to cover from a basics perspective. AWS is an API-driven platform. So every single action that you do in the platform is an API call. Whether this is logging onto the console, whether you're doing it from a CLI or running automation like CloudFormation, everything that is an API action is logged into a service called CloudTrail. So CloudTrail for AWS essentially is ground zero for you understanding what's happening across your environment. And we produce a lot of logs, right? So if you're a customer that's interested in understanding how every single API request that's happening within your environment, it's available for you in CloudTrail. And CloudTrail obviously integrates from a backend perspective with S3. So you can essentially store these logs for as long as you want. Talking about CloudWatch is the other side of the coin, is how are my resources operating within AWS, right? What's my memory, what's my CPU, what's my utilization? If I move into kind of higher level services like containerized workloads or serverless like Lambda, what's my duration? How much memory did I utilize? Was my request successful? Was it not successful? CloudWatch gives you the ability to, first of all, gather these metrics, store them in a centralized dashboard for you to be able to view what's happening across the environment. And you also have the ability to inject third-party logs into CloudWatch. So imagine if you are running virtual machines in your data center and you're operating in AWS, you can put something called an SSM agent running on top of these instances within your on-premise, and you can push all these logs into CloudWatch. So we give you also the ability to not just look at your monitoring and your logs within AWS, but also using third-party services or running outside of AWS. But that's basics. We see customers talking about Prometheus, talking about Grafana, talking about ELK stack, and how can I do centralized dashboards? How do I do intuitive dashboards? How do I build natural language processing on top of that, how I can take these metrics, convert it into text live for my CEO to be able to understand what my sales figure looks like or how my application is performing. So we've invested a lot of stuff into this. So we've released last year 2 services, managed Prometheus and managed Grafana, and especially to cater for customers that are mature enough to be able to look into containerized workloads and serverless workloads, where they can have these beautiful dashboards that they can build literally with a click of a button, like I talked about, gather all the metrics from CloudTrail, from CloudWatch, and boom, you plug it into a beautiful kind of dashboard that's available for you. So we're doing a lot of work, and we cater for a lot of different flavors. We also do have our own open source flavor from Elasticsearch that's available for you as a managed service within AWS. So as you mentioned, I tried to build an elk stack before I started with AWS. It wasn't a pleasant experience. there's a lot of shouting at the keyboard. These days are gone, right? So I mean, it's now basically you define what metrics you want, how you want to gather your data, and it becomes a managed service from AWS. All you have to worry about is creating the dashboards and the views that you want to be able to expose to your team. So again, the whole idea is about heavy lifting. We do the heavy lifting on your behalf. We take a lot of that engineering, we standardize it for you, and then essentially you get to inject your own organizational intelligence on top of our services. But again, I'm a massive fan of CloudWatch. CloudWatch in itself, as a basic service for monitoring and logging, is the heart of AWS. You can do so much with CloudWatch. Actually, in saying that, I'm running a security hands-on workshop webinar on the 17th of May. And we're talking a little bit about DevSecOps, and I do cover a lot of the stuff around logs and how we actually do that. I might send you kind of the link later to get some of your people to join. It's a free session, 5 hours. We're going to be discussing a lot of topics and a lot of hands-on work with AWS for people to experience that as well.
So you guys heard it from the man himself. You make sure you just watch out for what Lai has in store. It's awesome. I really like this fight. But there's one thing that I want to talk about. I think one of the difficult things when we're talking about banking is catering to auditing requests, as you said, audit requests in general. And I think with something like AWS config, you can probably have templates where you can just run multiple, let's say, like checking schemes, on top of your infrastructure to make sure if you have things that, respect the regulators, basically your requirements when it comes to ports that are open, your presence online over the internet, especially that many of the banks that we have might not have that internet presence, but nonetheless, for some of those requests, some of those services that they have, they might have not only for the internet, but I think the idea in general, with AWS config is you have like a more of a checklist that can be automated when it checks your environment, your infrastructure, and you have all these things, and you can also monitor when things go haywire. So you can basically have a red flag, when something is not meeting that specific standard that you put in AWS config, which is a wonderful thing. And we've used it a lot with our customers, and it saves you a lot of hours of manual work basically. So
absolutely.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, for sure. AWS config is a beautiful service, right? The one thing that people also kind of like to see is the idea of the lifetime of my resource in AWS. When people start working on AWS, we talk about the concept of pet versus kettle when it comes to IT resources. In the data center, everything is a pet, right? You water it, you feed it, you make sure it's happy and healthy, you replace components to make it running. In AWS, you treat your infrastructure as kettle, right? Everything is ephemeral. Things can come and go. You can scale up. If you today are serving 1,000 people, you have 3 instances, for example. Tomorrow you're serving 100,000 people, you can have 30 instances. And that infrastructure expands and contracts as your demand comes in. But that brings in a challenge, like you said, for auditors and for infrastructure people is, first of all, what happened over the last 30 days across my resources? People want to be able to figure that out. So AWS config is a fantastic way to record the lifetime of resources, whether they exist or whether they've already been terminated from your AWS environment. We record that lifecycle. Ameen came and created a VM, Louay came, modified it, and then Ahmed came and shut it down. An auditor needs to understand this information. Where these 3 people authorized to be able to do these types of actions. AWS config gives you the ability to record that and make it available for your auditors and available for your infrastructure teams as well to kind of understand what's happening. What you talked about is basically the rules and the conformance packs that you can deploy from a cloud AWS config perspective is exactly that. You're doing a lot in the platform and you want to make sure that everything is compliant. And what we end up seeing, and this is very typical in a data center environment, is you build things day one and it's beautiful, it's secure, it's perfect. Then 20 people come in and do multiple changes to that beautiful thing, and it's no longer beautiful, right? So AWS config is essentially keeping that beauty across your resources. So you have an expected state that you expect across your resources. And let's take something simple like encryption. You as a banking industry, you want to have encryption at rest as kind of second nature. So if you discover that one of your EBS volumes or one of your data volumes across your resources all of a sudden became unencrypted, AWS config will be able to detect that automatically, and not just detect that, but remediate that for you as well. So saying all my resources need to be encrypted with these specific keys, then it will check, say that resource is not compliant. How do I make it compliant? You gave me the ability to make that resource compliant, and it goes and changes that state. And that's a really, really powerful mechanism for you to say, this is my desired state. Any drift from that state is going to be detected and remediated. So AWS config is great in that sense.
Yes,
I can talk about it for hours, but I think that's enough.
No, we're really having fun, man. Thanks. This is a lot of cool stuff, and I think they're benefiting a lot of people here. But what I wanted to talk about also is the idea that those tools that you're talking about, it's extremely imperative to understand how they work, because with this new, let's say, state of mind here that we're working with infrastructure that is elastic now, infrastructure that should scale in, scale out fast. We're not talking about like the old era where you have your premise, you just adjust for a specific capacity and you're good to go. Now we have, as you said, you have the ability to just scale in, scale out, at the click of a button, basically. So you really need to have the right tools, implemented when we're talking about monitoring, about compliance. This is what is so cool about AWS config, as an example, among other stuff. Because back in the day, like if you really want to do it on-prem, you'll probably just do all of your work in, as you said, a VM. But when that VM is gone, you're probably just gonna, be there, and you're not gonna be happy. Yeah. So to have that dynamic field, that basically elastic field, for auditing and monitoring is really essential for it. Let us move to the idea of archiving. You could probably, like, touching again on the idea of compliance, skipping back to banking here. Normally the regulators go through a lot of hard demands, and one of them is keeping archives for a very long time. Like for 10 years, for 15 years, sometimes for 20 years, about your customers, their transactions. And that is because, sometimes it really helps them, like on the long run, when they want to do, when they want to resolve disputes, for example, or they want to go through a specific audit that they want to do. So in terms of Amazon Web Services, how can we really cater to those demands? I know, but I want to hear from yourself here, with S3 and the offerings that you guys have.
That's a good question. I think archival is a really big topic in the cloud, and it's probably one of the first use cases that we've seen customers adopt when it comes to the cloud. When we start talking about pay-per-use, customers were really interested in terms of leveraging the power of the cloud for them to be able to do long-term archival. We've done a lot of work from an AWS perspective to integrate third-party tool sets that you're using for your backup. And how you can actually transform that into native AWS services. So if you're using tools like Net Backup or Veeam or anything that you're using on-prem, you can extend that as well to AWS to be able to use services like S3. So to kind of put that into context of AWS, S3 is your unlimited expanding storage that you can have. You also have EBS volumes that are basically file-based kind of storage versus object level storage that's available to attach with your EC2 instances. So one of the challenges that customers came to us is saying, well, I want to be able to archive my data and I want to be able to keep them for 10 years, right? Health industry requires a minimum of 10 years, banking industry talking about sometimes longer than that, right? How do we archive this data? How do we keep it at cheap and available for us to use? So we built a service called Glacier. And Glacier is basically the concept of an archival service. So you can imagine, and again, everything, that's what I love about AWS. Everything is based on automation. Based on specific triggers within your storage volumes, you can say, this data after 60 days needs to be archived. And what AWS does from an S3 to Glacier, those two services work really, really well together, is S3 can transfer that data into a Glacier, something called a vault. And that Glacier vault essentially becomes your cheap archive. I can't remember the costs from the top of my head because there's a lot of zeros after the dot before the actual figure comes in, but it's cheap, right? And the idea behind it is that we give you the ability to put that storage into, it's not, it's like Glacier is not fast storage in comparison to things like S3 or EBS volumes because they're used purely for archival services. So you can essentially move your data into a Glacier vaults for you to keep your kind of storage available for 10 to 15 years. We also released a new service called Glacier Deep Archive, which acts basically as an alternative class from Glacier that kind of simulates the concept of an offsite. Right, it's kind of like remember when we used to have the tape days, right? Where you kind of put your backup tape and you send it to kind of offline storage that's available for you. We do actually have multiple different layers of storage that customers can leverage for this long-term archival. It's a deep topic that we can discuss for ages, but there's a lot of stuff that customers can do to keep the data for a long period of time in AWS, and obviously how they retrieve that data and how they can access that data can all be automated based on triggers that customers can decide that based on my audit, I want to be able to bring in a sample of my data from the last 5 years to show the auditor what we've been keeping from a data perspective. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do in that space, which we make it easier for customers.
Yeah, I totally love that. Like my experiments with Glacier were really cool. You know, I remember when when I was working in my first job, basically in a bank, and it was really a very, let's say, painful process to take those, you know, tapes and to actually do the backups every single day, and then you contract somebody to go and take them somewhere else, like an offsite place. So to have all of these things, as you said, natively embedded within your infrastructure, within your presence online, it's all about automation, as you said. Just like, you know, with CloudFormation and every other tool that you guys have, it's all about just, you know, taking that load and giving it to you guys, you know, the best, you know, the engineers who can really focus on solving those issues and allowing businesses, especially banks in this case, to focus on what really matters to them, their core business. Okay, I think we've touched on so many aspects that really can define in a way, you know, the context basically for how banks think about their business, their challenges in general. I want to move around on the idea of hopping on board. Now, like if you are completely sold with the idea of going, you know, to the cloud, you figured out that, you know, you can still maintain your confidentiality, you can still, you know, have that level of control, but you want to hop on board. Maybe you want to tell our audience the two topics here that I want you to shed light on. The idea of the shared security model, because we heard about it, but we still did not define it that well. And the second idea is, you know, somebody like you hear a lot of acronyms online, things like infrastructure as a service, you know, a platform as a service, software as a service. Can you just put those points on those letters so people can understand the level of maturity that you can have in order to integrate with the cloud? You don't have to do the whole thing from the ground up. You can just focus on top layers and such, you know, or you can just, you know, maintain the full stack. Just go through it. Let us hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think before we get into those specific two topics, I just want to make it clear for, regardless of who you are as a customer when you come to AWS, you have the ability to talk to us and talk to people like me as solution architects. So if you're a startup with 5 people or you are a large enterprise, you can get access to people like myself, account managers, and the business development that can actually help you build the strategy in terms of how you move to the cloud. We do understand that the cloud is a big mind shift in terms of how you operate. And we expect customers to have a lot of questions around that. So I think the first thing, if you are sold on the idea of the cloud and you see the benefits of it, talk to AWS, right? We are here to help, right? Our job is to make it simpler for you to kind of understand what you need to do to get up and running, right? There's a lot of tools that we do have available for us and for our customers to kind of get them not just the level of comfort, but the level of education as well in terms of what is cloud, how do you operate, and how do you get on that. But back to your question around the shared responsibility model, essentially we see security as 2 distinct layers: security of the cloud and security in the cloud. So the shared responsibility model is essentially that. It's AWS and the customer working together to provide you an end-to-end security posture on top of AWS. We take care of security of the cloud, and that comes in terms of getting the right attestations, the right compliance, the right security of all of our services that we actually are building for you. So when you start talking about EC2 or RDS, our relational database service, you know that it's PCI DSS compliant, you know that it's SOC compliant, you know that it's HIPAA compliant, you know it's FedRAMP compliant. So whatever you run as a customer, you're only responsible for exactly what you talked about, my actual workload that's running on top of AWS. So I think that's definitely one thing that you can, from a shared responsibility model, is benefit from. We make all these attestations and all these kind of compliance frameworks available for you as a service as well. So we have a service called AWS Artifact where you can say, oh, show me what's the PCI DSS compliance of AWS, and you can actually download the full report that the assessors have done across our services from PCI DSS, and you can get that list that you can give to your auditors, give to your internal teams. That becomes a good starting point. So I think that's it when it comes to kind of like the shared responsibility model. It's the basis of how we see security. So when we start talking about security services in AWS, it's all to help you to deal with security in the cloud. We know how to take care of security of our services because we do that on scale, and we've been doing it for a very long time. And thankfully, we've been doing it really, really well. But we want to also provide you the right tools. Like Macy is a tool to enable you to do security in the cloud. It's not something for us. It's something for you as a customer to be able to utilize. So we do have quite a few services that can help you as a customer build that kind of security posture in the cloud. But again, it becomes a joint effort between AWS and the customer to understand what your use case is and how we can move forward with that. The other topic that you talked about, the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, we try to avoid those terms in AWS just because the definition of them is quite confusing for some people, and vendors tend to define infrastructure and platform and software as a service very, very differently from how we see things. I think the way we see things is the level of management that you have to do. So back to that shared responsibility model. The shared responsibility model, if you're going to operate in something similar to infrastructure as the cloud, like a virtual machine that you're running within AWS, there's a certain level of responsibility that you have to take care of. You have to take care of securing your operating system, encrypting the operating system, managing the application on top, and then the data on top. But if you have a look at something like Lambda, which is our serverless function, where you essentially put your code, we take care of everything else. You just run your code on top of that. Essentially, we take care of everything. If you think about it, we're responsible for securing the operating system. We give you a secure partition of the operating system for you to operate on. We encrypt it. We do the shared responsibility model. We ensure the separation of data. So depending on the level of service that you're using from AWS, that shared responsibility model also differs, right? So if you go higher up the stack, you're responsible for a lot less. So we see customers innovating a lot using serverless environments, right? Serverless environments essentially is, rather than me relying on building the whole capability within a virtual machine or within a container, I'm going to give you my code. You scale up and down as my code runs. If I trigger my code once a second, great. If I trigger it 10,000 times a second, you do the concurrency on my behalf. And I think that's the beauty of it. So these are kind of a few things that we're doing. Obviously, we do have a lot of third parties and partners of ours that deliver a lot of services on top of our platform, right? So think of things like, I don't know, Splunk, for example, or App Dynamics, right? You can use that as software as a service. And our definition of software as a service essentially is a subscription-based model. You put in your credit card, you get access to a certain environment that's pre-built for you, and you are injecting your data. So we do have both models that we kind of operate on, and our services kind of traverse that stack from infrastructure all the way to software as a service. But the definition becomes a little bit hazy because when you're working with AWS, you're kind of working on all three different levels depending on what you're doing on the platform. Hopefully that answers your question.
No, this answer is spot on. And I also wanted to add that, your platform is really, really cool that it even spans the idea of encryption. So one of the misconceptions that a lot of people have in the banking industry is that the second you put your data on the cloud, they're basically gone. There's no confidentiality of it. So you have multiple angles to it. The first one is you're no longer in charge, basically, or in control of your data because it is somewhere else. And the idea is, the second thing is that, okay, when you upload something, basically the vendor, in this case, the cloud provider, is capable of looking, at the data in plain text, which is not really true. Because something like S3, and I'm sure you know this best than everybody else here, you have multiple encryption schemes that you can rely on if you're really that paranoid. You can allow Amazon itself, to go and do the encryption on your behalf. You can manage the key on your own. You can even have an HSM if you want, if you want to go that crazy, off the cloud or something else, like if you want to do it. But, that level of flexibility is just really, really beyond cool for businesses, to really just basically, it just caters to their needs, no matter what their needs are. You have the full landscape, and it's just you and your architects and the people that you talk to, and somewhere to utilize the infrastructure and the presence there. You don't have to. So I think the second I saw this idea of the S3 and the schemes available, so I figured, okay, this brings the whole conversation down when people talk about how the cloud is not really that keen when it comes to the confidentiality aspect.
I totally agree with everything that you said there. Customers' data is your data. The fact that you're hosting it on AWS, you still own it. You still have the full enablement to be able to encrypt it and render it useless for everyone that tries to see that data, right? Encryption is a great mechanism to ensure that you own the keys to the data and you're the only one that encrypted and decrypted the service. And you're absolutely right. We do have two main services, KMS, our key management service, and Cloud HSM. You can either rely on AWS to do the encryption on your behalf, or if you want to be able to manage the keys end to end, you can use our KMS service and integrate it with the Cloud HSM that's running on-prem. Or you can use our Cloud HSM that's running within the cloud, where you control the creation of the keys, the decryption, you control every single API access that coming across your data. So absolutely, you as a customer own the data on AWS. You will continuously to own the data on AWS. And we too take data privacy very, very seriously. You can imagine we're operating globally, serving customers all over the world. The one thing that we operate on is trust. And trust comes with evidence, right? Get the data, put a test data set in AWS, encrypt it, and see what happens, right? That kind of gives you exactly an idea in terms of you own the data, you own the encryption keys, and you own the lifecycle of your data. Also, our attestations proof in terms of destruction of data is another topic that customers ask us about. What happens when I delete the data on AWS? We have very rigid and strict processes of a multi-level destruction of disks that we go through that typically customers pay a lot of money for, and you get it just for the basis of using AWS. So there's a lot of stuff that we do to make your life a lot easier from a security perspective. So totally agree with everything that you said. It's you own the data, you have full flexibility to manage it wherever you need to and how you need to as well.
So beautiful, to just delegate your work to a really capable managed service.
I know.
It just takes that.
I'm still sometimes amazed, man. Honestly, like I still sometimes when I think this is the beautiful thing about being in the inside of AWS. We have a lot of really humble people that create a lot of really, really good products. Like I'm going to give you a small example. We operate in the two pizza team model. So the people that create these services, it's not an army of 200 people that are creating services. We operate in very small teams that are extremely capable, and they're focused, and their life is Macy. So the team that builds and operates Macy are very, very passionate people about exactly what they're building, right? And I think this shows in terms of how we build things. But I think the other side of the coin is that we do listen to our customers. Customers that use our services and find some features lacking, we welcome that feedback. This is how we operate as solution architects. You come and tell me your service has these fantastic features, but it's missing 1, 2, and 3. We take that feedback very, very seriously. And this is how we innovate. We listen to our customers, we take that feedback, and we build it back into our services. So it's a good cycle. When we get our customers to interact with us more, this is when we build better services that serves their needs better.
Yeah, I do agree. Customers come first, basically. And that is actually a perfect segue to our next subject, which is the idea of digital banks. Now, I'm not sure. So here's the thing. Conventional banks here, at least on Bahrain, they're probably not the best, among other stuff. Maybe we are good compared to other countries, I would say, because we have a small landscape. We have the ability to benchmark really fast and do stuff here. But in the most recent years, in the last couple of years, what has happened here is that we have this sort of hype and craze for the subject of digital banks. So a lot of people are now building mobile-only banks, and they only operate, with that basically digital presence. They don't have physical places. You probably have one branch or two, but the majority of the workload really happens over the application itself. So one of the banks that we have here in Bahrain is Ila Bank. And they're really keen about this sort of thing. And with Ila, the special thing is that they're really, they're really loud and they're really open when they talk about how they rely on AWS, and AWS also has that as a success story, in their website as well. And there's a lot of information. But I think for me, this is one of the really best choices that they made, is essentially in their strategy, because with a bank, basically with that target presence, you will have to depend on a managed service that can really deliver. In that case, with AWS, you have the global presence, you have the reliability aspects that you can do. and get that, as you said, we have the region here in Bahrain. So a very crucial aspect that we did not touch on is the idea of data sovereignty, which is really important for central banks and regulators. And to have your data here in the country is a big shift for all of us, especially for banks. So in your humble opinion, okay, if you are a digital bank, what would you rely on, to generally, in order to deliver that experience, that 100% experience that you promise your customers? What would you rely on?
It's a really good question, and I think first of all, digital banks are redefining the banking experience. I have to say, I don't know if have you kind of tried to open a bank with one of the digital banks today?
I worked in that for 10 years, so I can see both poles, honestly.
I gotta tell you, and this is just a recent experience. I moved from Australia about 9 months ago that I told you. In the last 2 years in Australia, we had a massive surge in digital banks, and I'm talking about in 20 plus number of banks that opened. And I think one of the great things that I've seen is the experience of interacting with these banks. I've never had an experience with a traditional bank where I was able to open a bank account, get my card, add it to my Apple Pay or to my Google Pay, being able to receive money on it without speaking to a single person. A completely seamless experience doing it from my mobile. So I think digital banks are definitely redefining the banking experience for all of us. And that takes a lot of work. And you're absolutely right. I think leveraging cloud services makes that experience better by default. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm not going to take a banking example from the region because I want to kind of give like an unbiased view. There's a bank in Brazil called Nubank. And they started with a very, very simple premise. We want to give you a credit card with 0 fees, right? And the only way that they were able to do that is by economies of scale. So they were a startup, and from inception, they were able to manage 23 plus million customers, providing credit cards and digital accounts in Latin America. And the only way that they were able to do that is leverage the scale of AWS, right? If you think about if you want to build a bank today in a data center to be able to cater for 23 million people, the amount of investment that you have to put in would essentially put you out of business. And I think this is where AWS is redefining that experience, right? Grow with your customers. If you build natively on AWS and build cloud native services, your scalability becomes second nature, right? Today, if I'm catering for 1,000 customers, fantastic. If I want to scale to 23 million, the same blueprints that I've built within AWS can give me the ability to expand to that level. So I think the majority of the digital banks, whether they're operating on AWS or not, they are using some kind of cloud services to help them with that scale. So I think there's definitely it's also definitely something that a lot of traditional banks are seeking. Well, how do we actually compete in that market? And this is where their migration to the cloud becomes more than how do I get my core banking system into AWS, but more of what the topic that I discussed initially. How can I redefine my existing experience with my customers that I can provide a similar experience what digital banks are doing today to help retain customers. Customers today become loyal to the experience. And I think that's really, really important. Like if you use an app on your mobile and you don't get the feedback that you want, it takes you 3 seconds to delete it. And essentially, this is the relationship that people are expecting with their banks. They want you to constantly innovate for you to be able to kind of retain that customer. And I think cloud services is a great enabler of that, for you to be able to innovate and release these services to your customers quickly.
As you said, there's a lot of flexibility, even it's not just for the customer. Yeah, customer is definitely centric to the whole operation. But when we're talking about how banks operate now, there's this spectrum where you can operate. It's not just you being in the cloud 100% or you working on-prem 100%. You can mix and match, as you said. So something like Outpost, exactly, yeah, something like Outpost, this is just crazy for me. When I heard about it first, to have basically some of AWS infrastructure on your prem. So you're doing two things together. You're utilizing their managed services. However, the data is physically on your premise. The data, the infrastructure. Absolutely. So, I know I want to give you the chance to talk about that as well, but it's really fair to say that, a lot of customers, when we're talking about customers here, we're talking about banks utilizing the service. They have a sort of heterogeneous setup where they have their core banking systems, at least on their premise. And they do have, a communication scheme going on, whether it's their data connect or like a VPN connection of some sort, where they can, offload that customer-centric infrastructure on the cloud and then do that sort of really transactional work, at least for banking, on the core system that you still, at least for now, in control of, But there's a lot of plethora of opportunities where you can offload some of your workload, some of your headache to a credible entity that can take care of that, and you gradually do that, so you don't have to go 100%, from the beginning. And something like that can really be negotiated, as you said, with experts like yourselves. So managing the strategy, the plan, the roadmap to go, for the cloud to make your job better. You don't have to do it alone, and this is the key item in here. You can rely on people like yourselves who understand the discipline, who understand the line of work, and have the ultimate expertise in realizing that. So what are your thoughts on Outposts and the idea of mix and match when it comes to the infrastructure? And by the way, we have 10 to 15 minutes. I hope that's fine with you.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'm happy to stay and talk about it. I'm going to try to be quick, at least to kind of get to your point. But I think you touched on something that's very important. Data sovereignty is something that's not going to go away. We're seeing increasingly cybersecurity is a real risk for a lot of governments and a lot of government entities around the world. And one step has a level of control over it. So data sovereignty is something that we realized as AWS, even though with our scale and our global reach, we cannot be in every single country with our regions to be able to cater for every single customer's local needs. This is where Outpost came in, and you're absolutely right. It's an absolute game changer. Outpost comes in 3 different formats that are available today. You can get a full rack that AWS delivers into your data center, or you can also get like a 2-unit or a single unit kind of server infrastructure that we can implement into your data center. What's different about Outpost versus a lot of different services that are available there is that it's as if you're operating in the cloud. And what I mean by that is you don't operate that by logging onto that environment locally. You operate with that environment by logging into AWS. It's an extension of the region, the same APIs. You can use the same automation to deploy infrastructure as code, the same services that you're using for logging, monitoring, and auditing and deployment. You get the same experience of operating in the cloud, but with the benefit of having the data available for you within your local country. I think it's a fantastic way for organizations that have data sovereignty needs, especially in the MENA region. We're seeing this increasingly happening in the UAE, Kuwait, in Qatar, in Bahrain, etc. So Outpost is a fantastic opportunity for banking industry or even the health industry for them to utilize the cloud while having and retaining that control of the data within the data centers as well. So I think it's a great way to operate as well. And that's hybrid is here to stay. We believe in that as well.
Yeah, as you said, it's not going to go away. The subject of data sovereignty, so it's here to stay. So, okay, my last question to you is, okay, so if we have a conventional bank, we have a retail bank, and they don't have digital presence, let's say they don't have a mobile-only strategy for now. So, as an expert in this field, like, what are the low-hanging fruit, basically, that you can go for? The low-hanging fruits that you can go for in order to maximize the utility of the cloud for traditional banks that have everything on-prem, traditional banks that have been doing these things, for a very long time, and they don't probably have the time to do, the strategy. Maybe on the long run, but at least for now, for them to really maximize the utility of the cloud, where they can exactly start.
That's a tough question, and it really depends on one thing, and I think this is important to understand. What is your why? Right? Every single customer has a why. Why do you operate, and what is your goal as a customer? What are you trying to achieve? And I think this is why building that relationship with AWS is really, really important. We've gone a long way from, I want to reduce my operational cost, right? You as an organization, you want to do something different to be able to excite your customers and retain your customers. So we always bring it back to the why. What is it that you're trying to achieve as a customer today that you're unable to do in your current setup? And how can AWS help you do that? And I think this is what we try to focus our customers on. We never come to them and say, hey, move everything to AWS, it's going to be better. That doesn't work. We know that doesn't work. What works is having a goal that we're working towards. So what I encourage customers or banks that are today operating purely within data centers is focus on the issues. What is it, the stuff that you are struggling with as an organization today? And come and talk to AWS about it. We most likely have a way to help you in that case. I'm a big fan of doing work for a real business value that it's going to provide value to either my customers or to myself as an organization. And I think that should be the focus. I know we talked in the beginning around redefining the customer experiences. That's probably going to be top of mind for a lot of banking industries, is right. It's like, how can I retain my customers? How can I provide a better service? If that's the focus of the organization, I think that leads into success. Having the right mindset in terms of what you're moving to the cloud and understanding the value of the cloud, the strategy builds itself, right? And then this is when you start, like when you start seeing success with AWS, and we always advocate customers start small. Get some specific use case that you're struggling with, come to AWS, talk to us. If we can do it, we'll tell you. If we can't do it, we'll tell you as well, right? I mean, that's the great thing about working with AWS, is that if something that we don't operate on, we're going to be honest in terms of our capabilities. But come with a small workload with an idea that will redefine your business, and that should always be a starting point. That full approach of all in, and I'm going to migrate everything first and figure it out later, doesn't work. So have a strategy, have a why.
That's awesome. I really like the honesty because normally, there's this saying that, some people out there, have that says, yes, we can do everything. And, being honest as a cloud provider, as a partner going forward, whether we're talking about banks, whether we're talking about even startups, to have that sort of honesty, from the ground up, it's really, really key to having a fruitful.
So about building trust.
Yes,
the thing is, our platform is so transparent that if I come and tell you we do something and you log onto our platform and you see that we can't do that, the trust is eroded immediately.
Definitely, yes.
And we operate on the concept. Like when customers come and tell me, can you do this and this and this, or something that we can't do? Our immediate answer is, if we can't do that, is no, we don't operate on that. We'll take your feedback, see what we can do about it. But we help our customers still, right? It's not about grabbing business. It's more about helping redefining those experiences. I think this is one of the beautiful things about our platform and the transparency behind it as well.
And really grew across those 15 to 20 years, as you said. You can really see the shift from, I think, 2003. If I'm not mistaken, all the way to now.
That was SQS, the first service.
Oh my God, SQS really deserves its own talk, by the way.
That's a different topic altogether.
Especially when we're talking about MQ. So MQ, message queuing, is a pretty big deal for banks as well, as they deal with a lot of payments. So this is honestly a really cool thing to really conclude the questions on. The idea to really, like, even banks, as they do a lot of messaging, a lot of Swift messages and stuff, MQ becomes an integral part, for the whole machinery to work in a scalable format and a very resilient, high available form.
Absolutely.
We have a question from Ali before we go to the closing remarks here, but I know it's a bit different from what we have planned, but I think it can really hold for some of the use cases. So if you have a startup that tries that wants to build a game server hosting platform on AWS, what is your technical advice for the startup before they start building their platform? What's your take, Louay?
There's a lot to uncover there, Ali, and thanks for the question. My immediate thing for you to go is have a look at AWS gaming industry page in AWS. We do have a lot of data in there. In terms of how to get started and some kind of the success stories that we have and some of the basic architecture that we need to do. I think just if I want to talk about the gaming industry is all about real time. It's all about state. It's all about connecting people together. Have a look at our industry webpage, and there's a lot of information there, and there's a lot of videos, and there's a lot of artifacts that you can leverage in terms of what you're building. Obviously, I can't answer the question specifically around what you're doing specifically with your game, but if you're interested, open an AWS account, even if it's a free account without having resources. Contact AWS, get access to an account manager, and we're more than happy to come on to you about how we can help you build this platform. So there's a lot of stuff that we can do in that area, and we've been doing a lot in that area. So check out both our gaming industry page and also our startup page. We do have a lot of programs that help you as a startup to, from a funding perspective and from a technical advisory, to kind of help you build that capability. So check out both.
But honestly, yes, like the free tier is really, really generous. It's extremely generous. Like if you just want to experiment for a whole year, and after that you get a lot of stuff that you can still, benefit from, as free services without really paying for them. I think it's a wonderful model that you guys have, where you allow people to adopt, by just liking the platform. You don't have to just, it's not like you get hooked in legally, just you like it, you pay for it. Otherwise, you can part way gracefully.
Exactly.
And I think, Louay, you're awesome, man. I think it was, the investors that I Chris, to get you on board. I think
I'm glad.
Awesome. So before, let me just tell you my 2 cents here before I open, for you the last few remarks here before we go away. So I think I was really surprised the second I got my hands on the cloud, especially with AWS. I never thought that I'm going to find out that I'm not going to find, a specific cloud provider that can serve me in multiple opportunities and different segments, and different maturity levels. If I want to get down to it, and manage servers, I can do that. If I would just want to manage APIs to do my work, I can do that. To have that sort of flexibility to keep things in here, keep things there, to mix and match, especially with the security aspects. So for me, it was completely eye-opening. And I really enjoyed my experience with AWS when I got started. But I want to get the last, basically remark to you, the remarks from yourself. So what do you have to really conclude with this?
Let me end by this. I think AWS gives you the ability to be a builder, and we encourage our customers to think of builders. But we provide you, as you said, we have so many different tools and so many different services that whatever you think that you want to build, you'll be able to build on our platform. I think building the right components and the right strategy. AWS is a great mechanism for you to take that builder mentality and implement it, whether you're talking about on small scale or large scale. Invest, if you're interested in learning about AWS, go to aws.training. We have a lot of free digital training that's available to kind of get you started on a lot of different topics, to kind of get a good understanding of how we operate in the cloud. I think the parting ways is AWS is here to help customers innovate. And I think that's probably one of the best things that makes me so passionate about this job, is our success comes from our customer success. We really operate on the premises that if you're successful, that makes us successful. We're really big on building those use cases with our customers, helping them innovate, helping them do things. I mean, one of the things that I find fascinating about living in the UAE is we have a company here called CAFU, CAFU, and they basically do this whole model of they deliver petrol to the door, right? In the UAE, we have limitation in terms of the number of petrol stations that are available. People want to fill up their cars. Essentially today with an app, you can say, I want to fill up my car and I want to get it washed and I want to replace my oil. That experience is only available with cloud services, right? Is redefining that kind of customer experience, how we interact with each other. If you have a big idea, if you have something that you want to build, I think AWS is probably the perfect place for you to do that. That's where we see a lot of innovation happening. So leverage a lot of the free stuff that's available for you from an AWS platform and talk to us. We're here to help.
Thank you so much, Louay. You've been so awesome today. I really personally had a lot of fun, sharing a lot of those stories with you, getting those things from like what you have to offer here. But it's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for your experience, for your time. I know you're pretty busy. You can see that online, but for you to dedicate an hour for us, an hour and probably 15 minutes, to go over those is something that we really, really appreciate. Thank you so much. And I'll definitely see you soon. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Have a great day. Take care, guys.
You too.